A Light Within Darkness, Chapter 2, Fan Fiction by Azazyel. I took the messed up corpse of the spider I had already killed, and thankfully, by relying on my cultivation art, I was able to peel off the chitin off the spider and safely eat the less twisted flesh of the spider that didn't get sucked dry from my Kasaya Blood Beads. But more importantly, was how the flesh of the massive scorpion heavily increasing my refinement speed as I absorbed the leftover life force within the spider. Even if it was a chaotic mess of life force, it still allowed me to ascend my diamond body fully into the first level, granting my skin the durability of copper and allowing me to start the refinement of my inner flesh. All of my techniques and auxiliary cultivation arts have 5 stages of completion. Practitioner, Apostle, Master, Perfection, Ascended. The use of the spider's life force basically helped me reach the peak of the practitioner realm, and more importantly I had reached the second stage of the elementary realm as I spent the next 2 days eating the spider, and once all of its edible flesh was done, I threw it into the cistern on the right side of my tunnel in order to not attract any scavengers into my vault. Now with no food and worse running low on water, I decided to take my chances going left in my tunnel. A few minutes into going left in my tunnel, the dim light seemed to be gaining strength and I was proven correct as I began hearing what sounded like human activity, even if it sounded like it was a particular bad neighborhood in Detroit, as every half a minute, I could faintly hear the faint cracking noise of a firearm ringing through the tunnel. Coming out of the tunnel I saw the source of the noise was another massive cistern, and instead of being overrun by spiders and other mutated beasts, this one had an overcrowded complex built into what looked to be a water purification plant, and a massive couple dozen mile wide and tall cistern honestly looked quite similarly to Blight Town from Dark Souls, and how decrepit it looked other than being made out of rusty metal and concrete instead of rotting wood. "Hey! Fresh meat!" a voice screamed, and my head snapped to the side as I reflexively dodged a small hunk of concrete someone threw with a sling. I looked over to the group of what looked to be gangsters confidently striding at me, armed with pipes and other blunt weapons, with the leader looking to be wielding a machete of sorts. "All of you but one may walk away. I have questions to ask. Should you refuse my orders, I will kill every single one of you," I said simply as my Kasaya Blood Beads began glowing underneath my leather jacket and unfurled from around my wrist. "Pah!" The leader spat at me, literally spitting a thick wad of phlegm that collided on the ground just in front of me. "Hee hee. A nice, clean, good-looking uplander like you. We are going to use you up till you are a broken toy, then we will have our friends cook you up nice and good into some corpse starch." Hearing their plans to literally use me as a sex toy and then to literally eat my remains, I sighed as I cleared my mind, and then my Kasaya beads flashed with red light as they lashed out and wrapped around the neck of the leader of the gangsters. The sharp, bloody beads deeply cut into the neck of the gangster, who collapsed to his knees at the feeling his windpipe being shredded and pinched shut, but before he could even scream or gurgle at the agony, I spoke quietly. "You freaks will only understand fear. I will send a message then." Then, calling upon my cultivator strength, I jerked hard, and the razor-sharp beads, similar to a piano wire, pulled itself through his neck, sending his head flying into the air with a spray of blood. "Kill the pisker!" One of the gangsters cried out desperately, attempting to rush me to stop me from doing whatever warped fuckery he believed I was doing, but a number of the group instead just heel-turned and began sprinting away as though their lives were at stake. Not that it made a difference. Pushing my chi into my Kasaya beads, the whip greatly lengthened, and with a loud snapping noise the whip acted like a steel wire breaking apart under high stress as it whipped aside so fast only a red blur was its presence as it tore through the half-dozen people in front of me, literally bisecting them at the waist, and it only stopped as it shattered a set of rusty pipes. Seeing the soon-to-be corpses in front of me, I didn't bother hiding how my Kasaya beads seemingly slithered across the ground and stabbed into the bodies and began draining the bodies of their blood as I stoically walked up to the lone survivor I left. "Will you talk? Or do I need to feed you to my pet demon?" I said menacingly as the Kasaya beads still wrapped around my wrist glowed a dark red in response to my words. "God. Korn is going to love me," I thought, cringing as the underdweller blubbered and finally told me what I wanted to know as he saw his partners in crime literally be reduced to dried-out mummies. Okay, so apparently this was Hive City Bornean, and there was a total of 20 major gangs that were ruling the Underhive in various parts of the different levels of the Hive. The miniature city in front of me was actually ruled by two competing gangs, and surprisingly they also controlled the major entrance to the lower hive levels above us, as the security and mechanics are basically using the gangs as security to protect the water treatment plants down here, and only giving the upper level members of the gang some minor support like decent food and the occasional weapon they could lose during a patrol. I stared at the gang member for a moment after I got the answers to the questions I wanted, and then, with a mental sigh, I flicked my wrist, and my Kasaya bead stabbed into his head, destroying his brain, giving a painless death as my weapon drank his blood. I couldn't trust him to lead me to somewhere safe in the city, nor did I want him running off to some church down here or one of the guardsmen stationed by the entrance to the floors above and tell them about an unregistered pisker about to take power, as that was something that even the normally apathetic oligarchs above their peasantry would sit up straight and would want them brought to heel either into their service or put into a black ship to be taken back to Holy Terra. Either way would be a fate worse than death. I looted the bodies and found some coins of indeterminate value, and after a moment of hesitation, I shrugged and took the leader's machete and then ripped off one of the gangster's shirts into thin strips to tie tightly around the handle for a stronger grip. A sword cultivator would kill me for the insult of carrying this abomination. I grumbled as the machete's blade was heavily pitted with rust, and its edge was also chipped in places from where the wielder obviously smashed it into either metal pipes or chopped a great number of bones with the weapon. Whenever I got the chance, I was definitely going to get a decent sword so I could use sword-based martial arts with, as sword cultivators bar none had the strongest offense of any sort of cultivator, with the sheer speed and power they could call up with their swords. I then walked forward along the catwalk suspended over the churning, while water beneath me towards the dwellings in the distance, with my loot in tow within my leather jacket's pockets, while also carrying one of the less ratty bags those gangsters were holding as a cover so I could use it as a decoy. Even as I came closer, with the way I was hunched over and the way that I didn't bother with the sneers of the people staring at me as I walked into the town, allowed me to avoid being questioned or otherwise accosted until I found what looked to be some form of bar, as shown by the crudely scrapped drawing of a cup on metal sign. Or at least I believe it was a bar, as I doubted the underhive would have something like a Starbucks down here in this hellhole. Each person I passed by was, to be blunt, disgusting, as many were missing a limb, were clearly deranged, or were suffering some other form of ailment, making them a leper in a more civilized place. But as I went into the bar, I froze for a moment as I realized that this wasn't a bar. This was certainly a gang-controlled brothel or something, as several chained-up, decently cleaned-up women were shakily dancing in their own personal cage, obviously drugged out of their minds, and more importantly, each one was branded with the same cross with a skull over their wombs, forming an ugly welted scar just above their exposed groins as they danced. I noticed some of the bouncers were leaning off the walls. They were out of sight as they noticed someone very much not a part of their gang walked into their territory, so I got moving to the end of the building, where there was a surprisingly well-dressed man cleaning a knife with a rag. "What you want, brat?" the man asked, raising an eyebrow before waving his hands to the bouncers that were approaching from behind me to stop where they were. I could tell that he knew I didn't belong down here in the underhive, so he was likely thinking he could sucker me in for something or another, but either why I spoke my mind. "I want to get up to the lower hive. What will it cost me to get through the inspections and security?" The man scoffed before he broke out into hearty laughter, literally shaking in his chair, before he leaned forward and stabbed his knife into the table in front of him as he seemingly took me in for the first time. "Heh, kid, do you even know what you are asking? People live and die in the underhive for a reason. They don't want our kind breaking out of our molds and having to share more of their already limited resources in the lower hive.